Hey guys, it's Molly. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be going through my 5-star reads and my favourite books of all time. It will not be a surprise to most of you that the majority of these books are fantasy. I think you know by now that fantasy is my favourite genre of all time. And yeah, it's the genre I give the most 5 stars to because I think the fact that it's fantasy, it's not grounded in like our reality, means it can change my brain chemistry because of all these new and interesting things that the authors come up with. So these particular 5-star books are my most recent 5 stars since I got back into reading a couple of years ago. I think the tail end of secondary school and university kind of like left me with not much motivation to read, but during my 3rd year of uni I got back into reading and now I'm reading more than I probably ever have. And yeah, it's nice to get back into a hobby that used to be such a big part of my life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the books in alphabetical order. I'm not going to be ranking them today, and I'll tell you a little bit about the book and then a little bit about my thoughts on the book and why I gave it 5 stars. So first up we have The Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. This is a young adult fantasy duology set in the Grishaverse, following the events of the Shadow and Bone trilogy that she also wrote. These books follow a group called the Crows in Ketterdam as they go through multiple dangerous heists and try to fulfill their dreams, however different they may be. The Six of Crows duology made me realise how much I love heists in books, like all the planning and the execution that goes into it and all the things that possibly go wrong. It just makes for some really tension-filled reading. I love the magic system that Leigh Bardugo came up with for the Grishaverse. It's basically just elemental magic, but it's a lot more limited. But you'll see throughout the books that there are some people that are trying to change that and make Grisha more powerful, to varying degrees of success. I also think the characters, dialogue, dynamics and motivations are also very interesting. Again, very different for each character, but somehow they're drawn together. You know, it's very much a semi-criminal found family. So this group of crows is made up of Kaz, Inej, Jesper, Wyland, Nina and Matthias. They all have different reasons for being in Ketterdam and they all want different outcomes of their life. And they all believe that working together, doing these heists and such will help them achieve that outcome. I'm really trying not to give too much away, so I'm sorry if my descriptions and thoughts on these books are a bit vague. But yeah, a very well written duology that'll just suck you in and leave you wanting more. The next book is also by Leigh Bardugo, and that book is The Familiar, an adult fantasy book set in the Golden Age of Spain. This book follows Lutzi Cortado as she uses her previously hidden magic, or miracles as she calls them, to go from scullion to winning over the royal courts. This book mainly explores power, mainly political and magical, but it also touches on the lines between magic, science and religion, and the consequences of blurring those lines too much. There's also a lot of ambition and what lengths different characters will go to achieve their ambitions, leading to danger, betrayal and trickery. Now again, I really loved how Leigh Bardugo wrote this. I think her writing style is definitely one of my favourites. I think she's just amazing at writing characters, like their dynamics, their development and their dialogue. And I think the plot and the way she writes it is a lot more mature than other books, which makes sense since it is an adult fantasy. That's not to say that Six of Crows and Shadow and Bone and all that don't deal with mature themes. They do, it's just in a completely different way. The Familiar just feels like it dives more into the political side of things, and it just feels like there's a lot of thought about where each decision will lead. So yeah, if you love a historical fantasy full of deception, ambition and the royal courts, then this book is definitely for you. And I am obsessed with the love interest. So yeah, there's that. The next 5-star book is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, a young adult fantasy focusing on fairies. In my opinion, Holly Black is definitely the queen of writing fairy books. Like, I used to be obsessed with the Spiderwick Chronicles. It was amazing learning about all these different kinds of fairies and the structure of their society, albeit in a more watered down way. But this book definitely delves into the insanity that is fairy logic. This book really portrays the fairies as they're supposed to be, which is cunning, deceitful and uninterested in mortals. We follow Jude and her life in the fairy realm years after her parents were murdered and she and her sisters were kidnapped back to the fairy realm. So her older sister is a fairy, but Jude and her twin sister are not. I think that's right. But anyway, the father of her older sister, who was also a fairy, decided to take them all with him. But Jude and her twin sister are mocked and tormented throughout their lives just for being mortal. Even though it's not their fault they're in the fairy realm in the first place. So I don't know why people are mad. They're literally like, you don't belong here. And I was just thinking, dude, I don't think she wanted to be there. I absolutely devoured this book in one night, in one sitting. I just read it until like 2 AM when I finished it, and I just had to lie awake in bed staring at the ceiling for a minute. Just contemplating my life. It was really cool to see Jude become more cunning throughout the book to combat the fairy's own cunning. And I am obsessed with her dynamic with Cardan. Like, I haven't read the second book yet, but I just know it's going to be the best enemies to lovers trope I've ever read. Like, even just in the first book, Cardan just seems a little bit pathetic once Jude finds out what he actually feels for her. even though he hates that feeling. And she's just like, oh, I can use this. And I love that for her. Like, this is a true enemies to lovers. Like, they absolutely despise each other. But yeah, if you're into fairies and enemies to lovers, then I definitely think this is the book for you, and probably the subsequent books in the series. The next book is The Atlas 6 by Olivie. I want to say this is an adult fantasy. It's set in the modern day, and it depicts 6 magicians as they get chosen to enter a secret society where they're supposed to protect and explore the Library of Alexandria. But only 5 will win. Yeah, it's one of those books. So yeah, over a year there's trials these 6 magicians must go through, but only 5 will win and actually get to stay at the Library of Alexandria. The magic system in this book seems more science-based, but I found it very interesting the way Olivie worked the magic into society, and you sort of understand why these characters have these specific powers. The characters themselves are also solid and feel fleshed out. They all have their own flaws, their own strengths and weaknesses, and you see their development as they learn more about each other and the society they might be entering. And while I think some people may find the writing a bit slow at times, I actually really love it. I find it really compelling. I love setup in a story. I love the world building. I love the little moments that don't seem like much, but then later on in the story you're like, oh, that makes so much sense. If you love mystery, tension, secret societies and shifting character dynamics, I think this definitely is a book for you. The next book we have is Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett, another young adult fantasy focused on fairies, but more so the study of. We follow Emily Wilde, who is a scholar and professor in the trilogy department of Cambridge University, and her quest for researching fairy lore to complete her Encyclopaedia of Fairies. To me, this book is very unique in the way it presents itself. It's written as Emily's diary alongside her travels to a village to uncover the secrets of the hidden ones, and it includes a lot of academic footnotes that Emily puts in herself that give a lot more depth and lore to what she's talking about. These footnotes typically contain the titles of scholarly articles or books, as well as fairy stories and lore. And during Emily's time at this village, we learn so much more about her rival Wendell Bamblebee, the townsfolk, as well as the hidden ones. Honestly, parts of this book are kind of scary. Like, some of the fairies that are described and what they do, it just kind of gives me the chills. But I just love that there's so much variation to the fairies that Emily meets. I also love Emily, but yeah, she's written as a character who's solely focused and hyperfixated on completing this encyclopedia and researching all that she can about fairies. She's not good with people at all. Most people find her blunt, and she needs the help of the charismatic Wendell in order to get anywhere with the townsfolk. And you know, it's kind of nice to see a female main character who doesn't really get emotional. You see all these male characters who are like a tsundere, you know, they're not very emotional, they're very cold and blunt. You never really see that with female characters, at least none that I've read. She's just very pragmatic and practical, and the only time she really lets emotions cloud her judgment is when it involves her dog. And also the few times she gets a bit closer to a couple of the townsfolk, but other than that, not so much. But yeah, I love this book, and I did love the second book, though I didn't give it 5 stars, purely because there were a few little flaws at the end that I personally didn't like. But if you love light academia books, fairies and some mystery, then this is definitely a book for you. Next we have Haikyu by Haruichi Furudate. This is a sports manga about volleyball, and let me tell you, I absolutely loved the anime, so much so it made me read the manga. This happens a lot with me. I watch an anime and it just changes something within me, and then I go and read the manga and that also changes something within me. I've only got 5 volumes of this. I've read them all and I gave them all 5 stars, so I am thinking I need to buy more. Anyway, personally, I've never really liked sports movies, sports animes, anything like that, but haikyu, I don't know, it just holds a very special place in my heart. Even though I hate sports anime, haikyu is one of my favourite animes ever. And I think loving this anime and manga has also made me appreciate other sports movies. Like, I don't think I ever really like other sports animes, except maybe the fighting ones, if you can even call fighting sports anime. But I definitely appreciate sort of live action sports movies more than I used to. So this manga follows Shoyo Hinata and his struggles to try and become the ace on his high school volleyball team, despite his short height. But it becomes very apparent that he's very athletic and he's very fast and he can jump really, really high. So this high school volleyball team, Karasuno, try and use that athleticism and really high jumping in tandem with Tobio Kageyama's really accurate, really fast setting ability. And I really, really love this manga, but honestly, I think watching the anime is a must, because watching the volleyball happen on screen and hearing the absolute massive slaps they give the ball, all the blocking, and just like seeing those dynamics, seeing the ball fly around the court is just so epic. Like, season 3 Okay, season 3, that was just peak anime cinema, you know. But yeah, if you like sports manga, and even if you don't really like sports manga but you're interested, definitely give this a try. Okay, I don't have the physical book, but the next book is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I'm unsure if it's a young adult or adult book, but it's a gothic fantasy set in a kingdom where dark magic is slowly taking over the land, taking the form of a mist called the Blunder. We follow Elspeth Spindle, who has an ancient spirit that she calls the Nightmare trapped in her head, as she gets thrust into a world of shadow and deception in order to help save the kingdom from the Blunder. And then throughout the book, she sort of realises the price of the magic the Nightmare gives her. And that's all I'll say on that. This book has a really unique magic system. So how Elspeth got the Nightmare stuck in her head was she touched her uncle's Providence card. So that's where all the magic comes from, the Providence cards. So there's different types of Providence cards and they do different things, and there's only a certain number of them. I can't remember the exact names of the Providence card, but say there's like 10 of one type of Providence cards, then there's like 3 of another. And the only way they can stop the Blunder is to find the one Providence card that only has one card of its type. But the problem is that card's been missing for years and years and years. So yeah, the magic system in this book is really, really intriguing, really unique, and it's really interesting to see even all these powerful characters with these Providence cards suffer the consequences and the price of using magic, because each Providence card has a different effect on the user depending how much they use it. So one card causes excruciating pain, another card sort of dulls their emotions and makes them a very cold person, and so on and so forth. And again, One Dark Window was another book that I just devoured in a really short amount of time. I borrowed it from the library, and as soon as I read it I was like, I need the next one, but the library didn't have it. So I bought it myself and I'm going to try and read it this year. And I also bought the first book because I really want a physical copy of it for myself because I just love it so much. I also really enjoyed the plot, even though it was a sort of generic saving the kingdom kind of plot. It was done in a really, really interesting way, with Elspeth herself sort of feeling just like a normal person who happened to have this bad thing happen to her that gives her power but also takes her power away, because every time she uses the magic of the Nightmare, he sort of has to take over her mind in order to do that. So it's a really interesting story of not only saving a kingdom but finding yourself only to lose yourself. Poetic irony. And I also can't wait for Rachel Gillig's new book, The Knight and the Moth. That also just sounds really interesting. I think Rachel Gillig is definitely a new favourite fantasy author for me. Next up we have the first 2 books in the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. This series is an adult fantasy set in the medieval land of the 6 duchies. So in this story we follow Fitz, who is the bastard son of the Crown Prince, and as a result of his reveal, the Crown Prince steps down and then subsequently dies. Yeah. So we follow Fitz as he figures out his role in the royal court, from a child of around 5 or 6 to a child of around 14, 15 by the end of The Royal Assassin, the second book. And as the title of the first book, The Assassin's Apprentice, suggests, Fitz eventually starts training to become an assassin for the royal family. So when he first arrives at the castle, Fitz is under the protection of Burick, a stable master who was actually, I think he was Chivalry's, the Crown Prince's, like, attendant or something like that. I can't remember the actual title of it. But because Chivalry died and he has like a leg injury, he's back to being a stable master and he takes care of Fitz. And when Fitz is a little bit older, maybe like 11, he starts training to become assassin at the request of the king. So that's the setup for Fitz in the series, but there's also a lot of broader things happening in the kingdom that affect Fitz as well as other characters. It definitely is a very political series, you know, full of court intrigue and stuff. I've noticed that a lot of these books are full of stuff happening in the royal courts, you know, plots, ambitions, so on and so forth. I didn't really realise I'd read this many books about politics and the throne and stuff. Mayhaps a new favourite trope? But yeah, there's so much shenanigans going on from the inside of the castle and also the outside of the castle. So we've got raiders from across the water and they're doing something really weird to the townsfolk along the coast. And then yeah, you've got the plots inside the castle to sort of get rid of the king and the next crown prince. If you're not interested in long-winded books full of world building, character building and politics, then these probably are not for you. But if you are, then these are some of the best books you will ever read on those subjects. Like, I still haven't read the 3rd book. I'm kind of scared of what Robin Hobb is going to do to Fitz. Like, he's already been through so much, what else can you put him through? But I love the characters. I love how they interact with each other. Feels very real. The Fool The Fool is my favourite character ever, and I think you'll find he's a lot of other people's favourites. You know, he acts like a fool, but he's not a fool, and he has agendas of his own, though I'm not sure if they're good or bad yet. I'm hoping good. And it's just the sheer amount of planning that must have gone into these books to make all these different connections and make this story like coherent and work and lead up to these different things. And she has so many books that I need to read, so please join me in my suffering. Next up, we have my most recent 5-star read, which is Kaiju number 8 by Naoya Matsumoto. I think I said that right. This is a sci-fi manga about a world in which kaijus and monsters are an everyday reality. We follow Kafka Hibuno, who cleans up the corpses of the kaijus after the defense force is done like killing them, getting rid of them. And he's a person who didn't pass the test to get into the defense force, so he's joined this cleanup crew as another way to help with the kaijus. And this book starts with the defense force upping the age limit to enter the defense force. So Kafka Hibuno realizes he's got another chance to do this, like probably one more chance. But before he gets a chance to go to the test, something happens and he gets turned into a kaiju. I don't really understand why he got turned into a kaiju. It'll probably be explained in later books. But essentially, a mini kaiju went inside him, I think, when he was in hospital after protecting a new employee of the cleanup crew when a kaiju emerged while they were cleaning up another kaiju. And again, this is another manga that I started reading after I watched the TV show. Like, that anime, it's amazing. And Kafka's character is amazing. Like, he's such a chill guy and he genuinely wants to help people, but he's just had this lot in life where he hasn't been able to do that properly, and now he does actually have the power to do that. He kind of can't because he's a kaiju and he would just get killed on sight. He's dealing with a double-edged sword and I love him. Like, he just wants to help. And because of his time in the cleanup crew, he has a unique perspective when he goes to the defense force. Like, he knows all these different kaiju's weaknesses and he helps out the more athletically inclined characters to eliminate those kaijus. But yeah, even though I've only read the first manga, I already obviously know what happens due to the anime. Obviously not all the story. And the anime left on a really big cliffhanger, so I really want to read the manga so I know what's gonna happen. Like, why is Kafka a kaiju? Why are there sort of humanoid kaijus? Like, are they developing, or is there like been experimentation or what? So the plot is really interesting and I really love the main characters. And I absolutely love Vice Captain Hoshina. Like, he's hilarious in the fact that he finds Kafka hilarious. But he can fight, he's a fighter. But yeah, if you like sci-fi monster mangas with a lot of humour, then Kaiju number 8 is definitely for you. Next up we have another manga, which is One Piece by Eiichiro Oda. This is a fantasy manga about pirates and the different abilities some of these pirates have because of these devil fruits. But unfortunately, those devil fruits mean they cannot swim. So being a pirate but not being able to swim because you have devil fruit powers is very ironic. So we're following Monkey D. Luffy and his dream to become the king of the pirates, and he's underestimated a lot because he's just a skinny little guy, but he has the Gum Gum devil fruit, which means he's basically like rubber, and he's able to use this in a way that lets him sort of just win most fights, at least that I've seen so far in the 18 volumes I've read. But he is full of determination and he's not giving up on his dream, and he doesn't like seeing other people give up on their dreams. So somehow he managed to get together a crew of pirates and they just go on all these adventures trying to find the One Piece, which is apparently the greatest treasure in the world, and then also help him become the king of the pirates. So One Piece is another manga that I read because I watched it, but not the anime. I watched the live action adaptation and I thought it was amazing. Like, just the practical sets and like props alone were really, really good. The acting and the character dynamics were really, really fun. So I picked up the first omnibus the next time I went into Waterstones and I fell in love with the manga. Like, the manga is obviously different to the live action. Like, there's different pacing and there's some things that obviously the live action didn't or couldn't include, but the heart of the story is still the same and I love that. And I think One Piece is definitely one of the most beloved animes and mangas around, and I just love seeing all the different kinds of devil fruit powers Eiichiro Oda can come up with, and then how the characters use them in battle, and then just all the crazy stuff that happens to these characters. Like, I don't know how he comes up with them, but it's just it's something. But yeah, if you like pirates and you like some like wacky weird characters and powers, then One Piece is definitely for you. Next up we have The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, a really, really big book that I'm so happy I managed to read. This book is an adult fantasy that's set in a world that's divided, with some people trying to bring these kingdoms and the world back together, but in the wake of an enemy that's been trapped for 1,000 years coming back. So that enemy is what they call a worm, not a dragon. So the dragons are sort of like the good ones. The worms are the bad ones. So like the dragons came from the stars and the worms came from hell. It's been so long since I've read it, and there's just a lot of information in this book, so forgive me if I'm getting it wrong. But we follow a lot of different characters in this book as they try to help save the world and stop this enemy from either waking up or stop him when he does wake up. But they encounter so many obstacles and trials and deaths. Like, there is a death in this book that I want to have words with Samantha Shannon about. Because why? But this is a standalone book. There is a prequel and then another prequel coming out, but you don't have to read them to read this. They're sort of like standalone books in the same universe. So there is also magic in this world, which is revered by some but frowned upon by others. It's more of a high fantasy book actually, in fact, because it's on such a big scale and there's so many different moving pieces to the story. And again, the characters in this book are just so good. Like, I love me some fleshed out characters, because to me, if the characters don't feel real or like they have sort of real motivations, real flaws, real strengths, then the story's not worth reading, especially in a fantasy book. And you know, I also love the world building, and there is a lot of that in this book. There's a lot of setup, there's a lot of world building, but within that there's these little bits of conflict that exponentially lead to the big conflict at the end, the finale. So they break up that pace so you don't really get bored as much as you think. So yeah, I absolutely adored this book. I really want to read the prequels. So A Day Full of Night is already out, and then we've got another one coming out but I can't remember the name of. And again, another book with sort of like court intrigue. But yeah, if you like dragons, if you like conflict, you like quests, then this book is definitely one for you. Next up we have The Raven Boys, as well as The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. This is a young adult urban fantasy or magical realism series set in Henrietta, Virginia, following a psychic's daughter and 4 private schoolboys in their quest for a sleeping king. This series is definitely in my top 5. Like, it's one of my favourite series of all time. First read it when I was 12 and it changed my life. And it's really funny because it was a book I just randomly picked up in a buy one get one half price, you know, because I went there looking specifically for one book and it was in a buy one get one half price. So then I just picked this up because it sounded interesting, and I like this more than the book I went there for. But yeah, I adore Maggie Stiefvater's writing style. Definitely one of my favourites. I love the groundedness of the magic. It's definitely more intrinsic and tied to nature. And I really love the characters. You know, I don't see a lot of these types of characters in books. Ronan Lynch himself is just an oxymoron in every aspect, and I love that. Yeah, so Ronan is an oxymoron. Adam is like principled. Blue is blue. I mean, you can't really describe Blue. She is just blue. Noah is deadpan. And Gansey, I would say, is eccentric, especially for like how he was brought up. Those are kind of just like one word descriptions for the characters. I don't really want to spoil it, because if I start talking about the characters too much, you will definitely know what happens. But if you haven't read the series, I really recommend it. And if you have read it, please tell me what you thought, especially if you loved it. If you hated it, don't say anything. But if you loved it, definitely please tell me why you loved it, what you loved about it. I really want to know. And I just love that the story veers off so much from its original course. Like, you never really see that. Like, obviously they do what they originally intended to do, but it's not the main story anymore. It's sort of like a side story, because they go on so many tangents that the main story just has to shift and change to accommodate that. But yes, highly recommend it, guys. Please read. And it's just one of those books that gets better as you go on. And I really need to read the Dreamer trilogy, which is specifically focusing on Ronan, so I really need to read that. But yeah, if you love psychics, quests for hidden things, magic, all that kind of good stuff, definitely for you. And the last 5-star book is actually not a fantasy. This is Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. I had a shopping list in there from uni. So this book was written in 80s Japan, and that was so surprising to me because the story itself was just so of our time now, and just all of Banana Yoshimoto's work is just really passionate. Like, you can tell she really cares about what she's writing about, and I think in the future some of her books would definitely be classed as classics, particularly Kitchen. So Kitchen essentially is a book about grief. You know, it's about mothers, it's about being trans, it's about kitchens, obviously, like sort of the heart of the home. It's about love, tragedy and loss. And it's actually 2 stories. So there's the main story, Kitchen, and then there's another little story, Moonlight Shadow. Like, Moonlight Shadow is actually really sad. Like, Kitchen itself was sad, but Moonlight Shadow, it just resonated with me a bit more. One of the characters in Moonlight Shadow is a boy whose girlfriend died, and to feel like he's still close with her, he wears her school uniform. Just reading about that just hit me. But yeah, I got this at a charity shop in Manchester, and I just picked it up on a whim, and I'm so happy I did. Banana Yoshimoto's prose is so lyrical and so sure of itself, and I don't know what kind of person I would be if I hadn't read this. And again, this is a book that I read in one sit, and I think I read it in just like an hour or two, just at my desk at uni, and then I just put it down and was just floored. And I think I was crying a little bit. But if you want a good book about grief and just human connection, then I think Kitchen is definitely a book you need to read. So yeah, those were my 5-star reads. I hope you got some recommendations that are relevant to you. Sorry about all the fantasy, it's just my favourite genre. And let me know your thoughts on these books if you've read them as well. And if you managed to make it to the end of this video, do the little sparkle star, not the normal star, the little sparkle star with the 3 different sparkles, that one. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Sweet dreams.